Okay. We finished the last shir in Shin Samach Gimel last week. There is one topic left in Shin Samach Gimel, which is regarding the bridges, which we will get to it at a different time. I want to go into the beginning of Shin Samach Daled. I know a lot of you did not start it yet, but still shall serve, I guess, introducing some of the concepts and going into details about it, and then you learn Shin Samach Daled, you'll be able to understand what it's about. Shin Samach Gimel discusses mainly mevoyos which have three walls around it, or any form of a enclosure which has three walls around it, and therefore it's inherently reshus hayachid and min haTorah, and what you need is a tikkun medivrei seifrim. And therefore, and even if there would not be a tikkun min haTorah, you would not be over on isur eitzah, and on isur, not isur, on isur of carrying inside of it. However, mitzvah medivrei seifrim you need to. That is Siman Shin Samach Gimel. Shin Samach Daled is discussing mevoyos hamfulashim that are open from both ends, and how to fix the reshus harabim. Sometimes these areas are not even reshus hayachid, even min haTorah. Shin Samach Gimel, they're all clearly reshus hayachid min haTorah. At least that's the first understanding of it. In Shin Samach Daled, we're going to go into the ones that are, some of them are bechad even reshus hayachid min haTorah. The first one is mevoyos hamfulashim. It's a mavoi which is open to reshus harabim from both ends of it, which we already know from Siman Shin Mem Hey Sif Yud Aleph, when it describes what a reshus harabim is, that a reshus harabim, a mavoi which is open from both ends to a reshus harabim, is considered a full reshus harabim. Right? That is what we know in Shin Mem Hey. Over here, what we're going to discuss is certain ones that are not inherently reshus harabim, and some that might be considered fully a reshus harabim. So Sif Aleph, the Alter Rebbe discusses the example of a mavoi which is mefulsh to reshus harabim from both ends. However, it's not a reshus harabim. Why is it not a reshus harabim? A, because ein rabim boikin boy, there's not many going through it, or it's not 16 amas wide, so it doesn't have the tenoi reshus harabim to make this into a reshus harabim. Or if it's open from one end to reshus harabim and from the other end to a karmelis, or it's open to a karmelis from both ends. Each one of these scenarios, the middle, the mavoi, which is mefulsh in the middle, is not considered a reshus harabim. So now, you can't compare it to a mavoi which is surrounded from three sides, which is what we discussed in the previous siman. That a mavoi is surrounded from three sides, you could be masak in the entrance with a lechi. Over here, or lechi or a kaira, over here we don't say that you could put a lechi or a kaira on both ends, even though it's not a reshus harabim. Why? Rather, you need a tzuras pesach on one end, and you need a lechi and kaira on the other end. Obviously, if you put a lechi and kaira, you know that it's got to be less than 10 amas wide to put a lechi. If it's a bigger pirza, you need a tzuras pesach regardless. And that's what we saw previously. Basically, you have to close off one end with a tzuras pesach. That way, you convert it into we know tzuras pesach is a full-fledged mechitza. You convert it into a full-fledged mechitza. Means you convert this mavoi, which is inherently not a reshus harabim, but it's not a reshus hayachid either, by making it tzuras pesach, which is considered a wall. You make it into a mavoi of three. On one end, you put a tzuras pesach. So on the other end, you can already put a lechi or a kaida, like we discussed in the fourth side. You put a lechi or a kaida, which is what we discussed in the previous siman. What is this Rabim Boikin Boy that we're talking about, and what's the issue with it? That we say if there's no Rabim Boikin Boy, then it's not considered a reshus harabim. And if there is Rabim Boikin Boy, then this mavoi mefulsh becomes a reshus harabim. Why does this really make a difference to us? If it's Rabim Boikin Boy, why would the din be different? Ultimately, the purpose of a mavoi is not for people to walk by. It happens to be that Rabim Boikin Boy, yeah. But the purpose of the Mavoi, the reason why the Mavoi was built was not for the purpose of Rabin Boikin Boy, it was for the purpose of people accessing their houses. So it's an access road for people to go into their houses. Why does Rabin Boikin Boy create an issue? Yeah, now the simple lashon, when you look at it, Rabin Boikin Boy, obviously, whenever it says Rabin Boikin Boy, it refers to 600,000 people. And that is the Rabbim, and when they go through it, so it becomes a Rishus Rabbim by definition. If it's 16 amas wide, and Rabin Boikin Boy, even though it's a Mavoi, and the mere fact that it's Mefulsh, and people are going to walk, 600,000 people are going to walk through it, makes it into a Rishus Rabbim. It happens to be at Tzemach Tzedek, one of the main topics that Tzemach Tzedek discusses is this issue. Is discussed in a bunch of places in the Tzemach Tzedek. The issues in Shin Samach Dalet take a bulk of what the Tzemach Tzedek discusses in Chidushim. I think nobody in the Tzemach Tzedek might not be a bad idea if some of you could get it if you want. Otherwise, I'll just mention it. Was there? You could take notes. The first one is on page 92, which is on Chidushim, on Eirovin, the Chelik Beis, Perek Aleph, the Ramaschil, Umevoyos. First, Tzemach Tzedek brings the din of the Rivosh. The Rivosh is the makir of this din, of this Mavoi Rabin Boikin Boy. And he explains what is a Mavoi, which is not a Rishus Rabbim. He brings from the Ritva. The lashon of the Ritva is she'ein b'ki'osan tedira uslula lahedya, that crossing through it is not common and it's not properly paved. I mean, it's not comfortable and it's not common. If it's not comfortable and it's not common, then it's not considered Rabin Boikin Boy, and Tzemach Tzedek uses the lashon the hainu de loy baki bo rabim kol kach. Not so many people are Boikin Boy for a simple reason, because it's not a standard. It's not so common. It's not properly paved. And it's not so common to use it. That's according to the Ritva. Right? According to the Ritva, because the Ritva doesn't discuss the Shishim Riboy. The Ritva just says it's not easy to access, it's not so comfortable, and it's not so many people use it. So that's Rabbim doesn't mean 600,000 people. Rashi, however, we know Rashi is the Mekar for the Shitta that Rishus Rabbim, to be considered Rishus Rabbim, needs 600,000 people, and Tzemach Tzedek adds a very interesting lashon. V'roiva poiskim cholku al zeh. The majority of poiskim disagree that the Rishus Rabbim needs 600,000 people. Rather, it's enough if it's 16 amas wide, and has the other name of Rishus Rabbim, and it's nasan l'Rabbim. And Tzemach Tzedek explains, even according to Rashi, the 600,000 people still have to have a road which is properly paved, which is easy to do. And if it's not properly paved and easy to access, then even if there's 600,000 people going through the mud over there, it's still not considered a Rishus Harabim. Now, if it's less than 16 amas wide, we don't care how many people go through it. The mere fact that it's less than 16 amas wide, it already loses the status of a Rishus Harabim. Taisvis doesn't go with a 16 amas. In this scenario, when it comes to Mefulsh, he takes a 13 and a third amma wide. He says if something is 13 and a third amma wide when it comes to a Mavoi, it's Mefulsh from both sides to a Rishus Harabim, it's also considered a Rishus Harabim. We're not going to get it right now into the Hemshech that Tzemach Tzedek, which discusses if it's still considered a Rishus Harabim afterwards. I didn't want to go into it at this moment. Yeah, just pointing out over here what the Rabin Boikin Boy that we're talking about over here could either be the 600,000 people according to Rashi, and then it still has to be 16 amas wide and it has to be comfortably paved. According to the Ritva, it has to be a lot of people people going through there. It doesn't have to specifically be 600,000 people. It just has to be, and if it's ein Rabin Boikin Boy kol kach, because it's not common, it's not properly paved, then it's automatically not anymore. It loses already the status of a Rishus Harabim. But if it's comfortable to go by it, and obviously if it's 16 amas wide, then it's a Rishus Harabim. According to Tosfos, even if it's 13 1/3 amas wide, it's fine, and it's still already considered Rishus Harabim, and that's it. So the Mevois that we're talking about in Sif Aleph are the ones that don't have these conditions. It means they're not comfortable. Ein Rabim Boikim Boy. What it refers to could be either there's no 600,000 people, or there is 600,000 people, but it's not comfortable, or it's whichever way you're going to follow it. The idea is that these Mevois are not inherently Rishus Harabim. Therefore, since they're not inherently Rishus Harabim because of the time of Rishus Harabim, so the mere fact that they're open to Rishus Harabim from both ends don't make it a Rishus Harabim. Therefore, all you have to do is you have to put a Tzuras HaPesach on one end, then you make it into a regular Mavoi, and then the other end you could do with a Lechi. Then Alter Rebbe continues, what happens if this Mavoi is not open to a Rishus Harabim or a Carmelis from both ends, or to two Carmelists? Rather, it's open on one end to Rishus Harabim, and on the other end it's open to a Chotzer, which they were Einam Urevis, which you didn't do Erev on it. Then you could put a Kaira or a Lechi on either end. On both ends you could put a Kaira or a Lechi. Why? Because what it's missing now, what's the Chotzer on one end, is Be'etzim Rishus HaYachid. The only problem that it has a problem with Mechitzas. This Mavoi, the only issue it has, it's missing Mechitzas. The Chotzer, really, it just needs another Mechitzah. It's not missing Mechitzas. It has a Chotzer in the end, so automatically it opens up the Chotzer. The Chotzer is also closed. So it doesn't have a problem with Mechitzas. It has 3 Mechitzas around it. All it needs is it's missing Eruv, because there's no Eruv Chatzeris in the Chotzer. So therefore, you don't have to have a Tzuras HaPesach on one of the ends. It's enough to put a Kaira or a Mava in both of these ends, because there's no issue with Mechitzas. The only time you need a Tzuras HaPesach is when you have something which the only thing it's missing is, which the thing that it's missing is a Mechitzah. Once you put up a Mechitzah and you solve the problem. And Yeshayim, some people disagree and say you still need some people say it's not enough to put a Lechi or a Kaira on the end where the Mechitzah is, where the Chotzer is, you have to put a Lechi. Why? Because over there you have to put it has to be closed off. So a Lechi, we consider a Lechi as a Mechitzah for the purpose of closing off a Mavoi. So over here you're going to put a Lechi in that end. It should be considered kesasum, as if it's closed off, because that is considered a Mechitzah. And Alter Rebbe says, and now you're going to have a question. The question should pop up right away. We discussed previous few shiurim ago, the based on Alter Rebbe, the way the Alter Rebbe explains Halacha Kedivrei Seifrim, Halacha Mekel B'divrei Seifrim, when it comes to Eiruvin, it does not refer to Mechitzas, only refers to the actual Eruv, the dinim of Eruv, not the dinim of Mechitzas. Some people say it does apply also to Mechitzas. But the simple understanding of Alter Rebbe is it does not apply to Mechitzas. So therefore, why over here it only applies to Eruv Chatzeres? So why over here does it work? We say Halacha Kedivrei, that he says Kamekel Halacha Kedivrei Mekel Be'eruvin. V'chayra, what we're discussing it in Mechitzas. The answer is, just like you read it before, the Alter Rebbe clearly tells you, it's not about Mechitzas, it's about Eruv. This din over here, the din where you have to put do you have to put a Lechi, or it's enough to put a Kaira separating the Chotzer from the Mavoi, the Alter Rebbe clearly tells you, it's nothing to do with Mechitzas. It has to do specifically with the idea that there's no Eruv in the Chotzer. So even though what you're doing is over here, you're closing it off, so it's essentially a Mechitzah that's closing it off. What you're doing is it's not a kula in mechitzas. It's a kula in the Eruv, because the place, the Chotzer does not have an Eruv, we're using a kula for that purpose. Now, if the people of the Chotzer commonly use the Mavoi as their entry and exit point, then nothing is going to help, even Tzuras HaPesach, anything. Why? Because the problem is not about mechitzas, and it's not about a hekel, and it's not about any of that sort. Not a Tzuras HaPesach, not losses, nothing is going to help. The only thing they actually have to make an Eruv, like two Chatzeres next to each other, they have to make an Eruv, the Bnei Mavoi with the Bnei Chotzer have to make an Eruv to allow one to carry through the other one. and nothing else is going to help, because the mere fact that they're using, but the Bnei Chotzer are going through the Mavoi in and out, makes it as two Chatzeres which are open to each other and need to have an Eruv between them two to allow the carrying from one to another. Now, that's Sif Aleph. In Sif Beis, the Alter Rebbe continues and says, all this applies only in a Mavoi. But we're Mavoi, why? Because by a Mavoi we know that you could use the whole discussion, whether you could use a Lechi, or a Kaira. By a Chotzer, we say that we're more Machmer. By a Chotzer, the only thing you could use is Pasim to do it. Either one big Pas or two small Pasim. Or, so if you have a chotzer, or you have a mavoi, which is not really a halachic mavoi because it doesn't have doesn't have the two chatzeres, and each chotzer has two houses, etc., which is the tnaim of a mavoi. So then, once it becomes a chotzer, we have a kul over here. Even if it's open from both sides to a reshus harabim, and even if boikim boy rabim, still in all, it's enough to have a tikkun of a chotzer. We don't say that you have to have a tzuras HaPesach on one end. Rather, you could put pasim on both ends, just like any other chotzer. Tzemach Tzedek comes and tells you it doesn't understand how this works. Tzemach Tzedek in the same page 92, which is a chelik beis of chidushim on Maseches Ceirovin. Now, like I think I mentioned in the past, Tzemach Tzedek Chidushim, you have what was printed, the first print, which is the main one. Then you have what they found afterwards, which was printed as a suffix, that's called Chelik Beis. That seems to me like it was written before, like more of a Madura Kama. It's shorter, it doesn't mention Alter Rebbe. So in what we call the Chelik Beis over there, in the same page 92, the Maschil Kamashmalon, over there, that's a short paragraph. I don't understand how they paskin that when it comes to a chotzer and a foolish on both ends, and Rabin Boikin Boy, it's enough to just do a tikkun of a chotzer. Why? We know the halacha is asur Rabim mevatla mechitza. Rabim come and they will eliminate any mechitza that there is. Therefore, if Rabin Boikin Boy, the mere fact that you put a pasim on each one of the ends doesn't solve the problem. You're going to say it's a chotzer? No, still doesn't solve the problem. He says, I don't understand how it was paskin like that in Shulchan Aruch. So therefore he says, must be that we're talking about a chotzer shel yachid, and not a chotzer of a bunch of people. It's a chotzer of one person that's mefulsh from both sides to reshus harabim, and therefore we have to say that if a chotzer shel yachid retains the title of reshus hayachid, even if rabim boikim boy, and therefore in this specific scenario of a chotzer shel yachid, you could do the tikkun on both ends of pasim, like a tikkun chotzer. But in every other scenario where you're going to use a mavoi, which we consider as a chotzer, or a chotzer sherabim, that's not going to help, and it would, since also rabim and vatla mechitza would actually need a full tikkun like a reshus harabim, which we're going to discuss later. That's what the Tzemach Tzedek writes in Chidushim Chelik Beis. The reason I mentioned that first is because, like I told you, I think that was written first. Now we're going to go to Chidushim in the main Chidushim which are printed, which is in Chelik Aleph and Perik Beis, Perik Hey Mishnah Vav. Over there, the Tzemach Tzedek has a long discussion about an Ir Shel Yachid, a city which belongs to one person. We didn't get into that topic yet in learning, but the discussion over there about Ir Shel Yachid is different shittas in the Rishonim. What Ir Shel Yachid, or the definition of Ir Shel Yachid. In between that discussion, Tzemach Tzedek goes in and says, how do you define Shel Yachid? Over there it says, Tzemach Tzedek says, could be that, according to some opinions, it would mean that even if this Ir Shel Yachid has streets which are 16 amas wide, and it has 600,000 people in the city, and the roads are paved properly, because that's what Tzemach Tzedek writes in a different place, that you have to have from the Ritva, the roads have to be paved properly, it's still not considered Reshus Harabim. Why? Because Eini Masur L'Rabim. It's not being that it's a shel yachid, it's a ir shel yachid, it's not given. The people don't have full rights to the streets. Masud l'Rabbim means that it's full rights to the Rabbim to go through it. Therefore, it's not considered Rishus Rabbim. That's one way of looking at it. Or, we're going to say, we don't look at the ownership definition of it, or whether it's Masud l'Rabbim or not. We look at the concept of Asur Rabbim Vatla Mechitza or not. The fact is, even in the Ir Shel Yachid, if you have wide streets and you have 600,000 people, Asur Rabbim Mevatli Mechitza, and therefore should be considered a Rishus Rabbim, even if it is fully owned by a single person. And therefore, Tzemach Tzedek said, if you have a Chatzar Shel Yachid, not an Ir Shel Yachid, a Chatzar Shel Yachid, L'chayra, we should say the same thing. If we say it by Chatzar Shel Yachid also, if Rabbim are boikim boy, and also Rabbim Mevatli Mechitzim, Mefulush on both sides, should be the same din. And therefore, on the top of the page, on page 89, when it continues, the Tzemach Tzedek explains this din of the Chatzar and Mefulush from both ends, that you could be Mesaken of Tikkun Chatzar, rather than Tikkun Mevoyos, rather than Tikkun of a Rishus Rabbim, which is with glosses, which you're going to soon see. He explains that what the Alter Rebbe is talking about over here in this if base, that what you do is it's enough if you have a chatzir, or if you have a chatzir, that you could do a tikkun of a chatzir and you don't have to put a tzuras HaPesach on one end and a lechi on the other end. It's referring to a very specific scenario of a chatzir. That the opening is less than 10 amas, or at least less than 16 amas. And then, since the pathway is less than 16 amas, less than 10 amas, the pitch is less than 10 amas. The pathway is at least less than 16 amas, but even better, less than 10 amas. In such a scenario, it anyways doesn't have the name of Rishus Rabbim because it's less than 16 amas wide, and the pitch is less than 10 amas if you go away in the stricter way that Tzemach Tzedek is trying to take the approach. So therefore, it reverts back. Then we say for sure it stays as a chatzir. Since it stays as a chatzir, it doesn't lose the status of a chatzir for the purpose of a tikkun of a chatzir. And all you have to do is put a lechi or put pasim and you solve the problem. But if it's 16 amas wide, then even if it's a chatzir shel yachid, of a single yachid, still you need full tikkun of a Rishus Rabbim, just like you would do for a regular Rishus Rabbim, which is going to be discussed in Seif Dalet. Why is it? Because if you have pirtzes less than 10, we don't say Asur Rabbim Vatla Mechitza. Why? Because when you have a pirtzah less than 10, we look at it as if it's mamash mechitzas gemuras. There's no Asur Rabbim. And between 10 and 16, because he says 16 we know for sure is Rishus Rabbim, less than 10 we know for sure is Rishus Yachid. But the Tzemach Tzedek says less than 10 or even less than 16. Why less? What happens between 10 and 16 between these two things? Tzemach Tzedek uses a very interesting lashon. Yeshloimer denehide in Rishus Yachid. It's not Rishus Yachid. But Rishus Rabbim nami lo have. It's also not Rishus Rabbim. Elamai, what is it? A Carmelis. If it's a Carmelis, then by definition you go back to the tikkun of a chatzir. You could do it with a tikkun of a chatzir. You don't need to do a tikkun of a Rishus Rabbim with glosses. That's the if base. Comes to if gimel. Yeah, when we discuss the Alter Rebbe comes and discusses now mevoyes shelanu. That means because until now we thought, when we learned Sif Beis, we didn't learn Sif Gimel yet, we thought that when we say Tikkun Chatzir applies to a Chatzir which is open for both in Rishus Rabbim, the Chayra should apply also to a Mavoi Shelanu, which doesn't have the din of a Chatzir. The Alter Rebbe says no, Mavoi Shelanu, you can't use the kula of a Chatzir to say you could do pasim on both ends. He says, when it comes to mefulsh, these mevoyes don't count as a chatzah, that you could do a tikkun chatzah. Rather, you need a tikkun of a mavoy. Where machmer and these mevoyes are taken out like a chatzah, they're taken out like a mavoy for the previous siman to be mekel. To have tikkun mevoyes here, that you should be able to do tikkun chatzah. But when it comes to this case of mefulsh, you can't say it lakula, that you could also use this and be masakin it the way you do masakin a chatzah. Rather, you have to masakin it like a mavoi, which is tzuras HaPesach from one end, and a lechi or a koida from the other end. Why? Because our mevoyos, even though halachically they would fall into the category of a chatzir, ultimately they're very close to the Rosh Hashanah, or they're close to a Carmelis, and as opposed to, also we explained it in the past, that the mavoi, which is, even if it's a mavoi which is very close, the difference in a mavoi and a chatzir is, a chatzir, the reason that there's different dinim, is because a chatzir doesn't have direct access to the Rosh Hashanah. Chatzir goes to a mavoi, house to a chatzir, to a mavoi, to Rosh Hashanah, or to a Carmelis. Over here, these mevoyos, mevoyos shalanu, which we consider them as chatzeres in the previous siman to be machmir, are still open to the Rosh Hashanah on both ends, or to a Carmelis, or to whatever it is. They're direct access to a Carmelis. So because they're direct access to a Carmelis, we can't use the kulas of a chatzir. We have to be machmir when it comes to mefulsh, we're masakin it like a mavoi. And from that, the Alter Rebbe moves on to to Rosh Hashanah, where we say that a Tzuras HaPesach doesn't help, and a Lechi doesn't help, and a Koida doesn't help. All those don't help. Now, Alter Rebbe begins with a statement which is it's in parentheses. Some people disagree with it. Alter Rebbe starts by saying, even though Midiraisa Tzuras HaPesach helps, four Tzuras HaPesachs on all four sides helps to make a Rosh Hashanah into a Rosh Hashanah Gemura, still in all, Midrabanan, Tzuras HaPesach doesn't work for Rosh Hashanah to make it into Rosh Hashanah, and you need glosses. You need doors, mikan, glosses from both ends. Right? And then the Alter Rebbe goes into those dinner, but before we go into it, let's first understand the first statement. The Alter Rebbe starts with a statement, called a bombastic statement, that Midiraisa, you put four Tzuras HaPesachs in a Rosh Hashanah, and it automatically, in a Rosh Hashanah, and it converts it into a Rosh Hayachid. The Tzemach Tzedek obviously goes into it at length. It's in page 86, in Eirovin Perek Beis, Ois Beis, and he goes into a whole discussion when yes and when not. So we're going to see that Tzemach Tzedek has different places, writes differently, and it seems from the Rebbe that the Rebbe takes the approach of the Alter Rebbe clear, but soon you see it's a diuk in a letter of the Rebbe. So Tzemach Tzedek, like I said, in page 86, which is Eirovin, the first, the regular Chidushim in Eirovin Perek Beis, Mishnah Beis, Ois Beis, has a very long couple columns discussing it, and he first starts and says like this: according to Taisvis, L'chayra Midiraisa Tzuras HaPesach will help. Tzuras HaPesach from all four sides will help, even in the Rosh Hashanah. Just like in the Mavoi Mefulsh, which is open to Rosh from both sides to Rosh Hashanah and Tzrochav, and it's wide 16 ames. L'chayra, according to Taisvis, Tzuras HaPesach would work Midiraisa. Why? Even on all four sides, just like it works in the Mavoi Mefulsh, Midiraisa, not Midirabanan were machmer. Midiraisa, if you put a Tzuras HaPesach on both ends of a Mavoi Mefulsh Rosh Hashanah, which has the name of Rosh Hashanah, it would make it into Rosh Hashanah. Why? Because Tzuras HaPesach, we consider it a Mechitza Gemura. And once the Tzuras HaPesach is a Mechitza Gemura, we don't say Asura b'Mevatla Mechitza. Just like a Pasibiro, it's the same thing. And only Midirabanan, we need losses. That's mashma from Taisvis. But according to the Ritva, it doesn't work like that. Why? Because according to the Ritva, Midiraisa, even by Tzuras HaPesach, we still say Asura umevatli mechitza, and Pasibiro is a different din. Pasibiro is you have the corners when they used to make for the oil of the golem, that's considered a Shosei Yachid Midiraisa. It's a different din. Yeah, and it's explained that Tzemach Tzedek over there goes into each one of the possibilities is different. I'm not going to go into it right now. We're going to discuss about Tzuras HaPesach, and the Ritva says it doesn't help. So Tzuras is a din miyuchad. It's stronger because it has on each side it has the distance, enough distance to make it into a wall. So it's a different din than Stam having four Tzuras HaPesachs. One put four poles and tie a string on top of them and convert it into the Shusayachim Midrabanan. According to the Ritva, when you have glosses, which is what we're going to see soon, that for Tzura Rosh Hashanah we need glosses, that glosses which do not get locked at night have the same So he says over there, midiraisa it helps, midirabanan it doesn't. Why? For the same problem, because asurabim, if you have losses which never close, also you have the same issue of asurabim, and the same thing is with Tzurasa Pesach also, you have the problem of asurabim vatam mechitza. And the Ritva says that losses which don't get closed at night are much better than the Tzurasa Pesach. And over there we don't say asurabim midiraisa, and still in all, you still need them midraban. You still need to be locked. Midiraisa, it would be we would say asurabim by losses, and for sure, and losses are much better than Tzurasa Pesach. But Tzurasa Pesach for sure we would say it, and it would not be considered. It would make it ois reshus hayachid. It would make it not be reshus hayachid. It will still remain a Rishus Harabim. Right? And that's the one way of looking. And it says maybe even in glosses, from the Ritva, it looks like maybe in glosses, She'enam Ninalis, Midiraisa it would work to make it a Rishus Hayachid, but not Midirabanan. Midiraisa would work, not Midirabanan. Then it's our second thing, it says, you know what, maybe even in glosses, She'enam Ninalis, we still would say Asurabim Vatam Mechitza. And Pasibiros is a separate din because you have the Amma from each side. So what happens? How does Pasibiros work? Not because the Pasibiros make a new Rishus. What Tzemach says, you got it all wrong. The reason why Pasibiros works is, you have 16 Ammas wide, you put the Pasibiros and Amma on each side, you shrunk the 16 Ammas to 14. You shrunk it to 14, then you don't have any more, you lost it now of Rishus Harabim. Not because of Asurabim, not because of any other reason. But if there will be a Tzurasa Pesach, or be at losses which are completely open the whole time, and you have 16 Ammas wide, you didn't solve anything. Asurabim, when you have the 16 Ammas of width, and people going through it, still considers it the Rishus Harabim. The fact that you have a Tzurasa Pesach doesn't change anything. Pasibiros is a special din, because you have an Amma on each side, you shrunk the width, so it's fine. That solved it and made it Ois Rishus Harabim. And by definition, then you don't have any more the asurabim which will destroy it. And he continues and he says, and it's mashma from the Rambam also, that in a Rishus Harabim, Tzurasa Pesach is not going to help to make it into a Rishus Hayachid. That's what he explains in page 86, which is Perek Beis Ois Beis.
Naming a Milot to Tzurasa Pesach, not a technical reason because it's less than 16 Ammas.
When? I know, but saying so that's why he goes to the Rishonim and says it doesn't work. So Tzemach Tzedek says it doesn't work to say that, at least in this part of Tzemach Tzedek. Different place in Tzemach Tzedek in Perek Hey Mishnah Vav. Over there he says that we could say that Midrabanan, he could say that Tzurasa Pesach does work Midiraisa. In the Rishus Harabim, from all four sides, or at least if it's open only from two sides, like the shit. You could say that Taisvus, when Taisvus says that it's fine on two sides, it doesn't apply to all four sides. But in the Mavoi Mefulash, if you have a Tzurasa Pesach on each of the two sides, it will work midiraisa to make it a Rishus Hayachid, and like Pasibiros, and Kaponim that's in Lashon Tzemach Tzedek says, Ein Raya Gemura, the Gam B'Tzurasa Pesach. Amrinon Kain, Midiraisa. We don't have, at least, we can't say with clear certainty that Midiraisa, we say Asurabim, even when you have Tzurasa Pesach in a Rishus Harabim. So that's what Tzemach Tzedek says, we can't say for sure about it. The Divrei Nehemiah has a much easier approach to the whole thing. When the Divrei Nehemiah it's in page Siman Chav Gimel on page 104, very small paragraph. Inyan HaMachmirim over there. He says on this words of the Alter Rebbe in parentheses. He says it doesn't make sense. Well, the daiti ein ze dvarov zal. He says I don't think the Alter Rebbe was the one who wrote this. This parenthesis is not from the Alter Rebbe. He says why? Because it's clear that according to Rabbi Yochanan it doesn't work. Midiraisa Tzurasa Pesach in a Rishus Harabim, and it also contradicts what the Alter Rebbe writes in the Rebbe contradicts what the Alter Rebbe writes in Siman Shin Mem Hey, that when you have a Mefulsh Mishar Lashar in the Reshus Harabim, you have a city surrounded, you have a street that's mefulsh mishar that goes from one end to the other, and there's a direct path from one side to the other. It's considered a Reshus Harabim without dlosses nin olos. And the fact that the Alter Rebbe says you need dlosses nin olos obviously means that if dlosses she'ein nin olos wouldn't help. Dlosses she'ein nin olos wouldn't help. So Pesach for sure wouldn't help, because Pesach is less than dlosses nin olos. That is what we see from the Tzemach Tzedek. I'm going to go through to something from the Rebbe. We mentioned in previous shiurim about the kuntris of Rav Eisenstadt and the kuntris of Rav Moshkovich that they wrote about the Ceiruv in Manhattan, that the Rebbe wrote comments on both of those kuntresim. I didn't print you the kuntresim, I printed you the letters of the Rebbe. So regarding Manhattan, when Rav Eisenstadt wrote it, which as I said, it's in the book Divrei Menachem to Menachem Kasher, in the beginning in Ois Gimel, he writes that all the tzedadei aheter that he has for Manhattan, that he discusses a whole bunch of tzedadei aheter, and they're only le'inyan halacha, they're only for pilpulim. Aval lemaaseh tzrichim anu lehaniach ki Manhattan ilmoli mechitziseho, that Manhattan, if not for the fact that it has the mechitzas, as we discussed last time, the mechitzas of the river, and of the sea, and the walls, and everything else, if not for the mechitzas, Manhattan would have been Reshus Harabim aliba de kule alma midiraisa. Manhattan would have become a Reshus Harabim de kule alma midiraisa, if not for the mechitzas around it. That's what the Rav Eisenstadt wrote. And this is what he wrote in the beginning, because the way Rav Eisenstadt wrote Kundas, he first wrote a summary. In the beginning, in Perek Aleph Ois Gimel, he just wrote in point. Afterwards, he explains it. Then he goes through. He discusses how the pirtzes are. He says the tunnels. He discusses over there. He explains how he solves it. He says the tunnels, each one have in the beginning or in the end the toll booths. I mean, where they collect the tolls. Today it's the whole thing. And that maybe it could be considered like a delis, which gets closed once in a while. The bridges have tziras HaPesach. Elamai, it doesn't help. Why? Because tziras HaPesach doesn't help. He says it's tziras HaPesach are not going to help. The tziras HaPesach of the bridges are not going to help because Manhattan is a city which has more than 600,000 people. And therefore, it's Reshus Harabim midiraisa. And to be Mesaken Reshus Harabim midiraisa, Tziras HaPesach doesn't help, not to the Rambam. According to the Rambam, it doesn't help midirabanan. According to the other poskim, it doesn't help even midiraisa. Therefore, you dafka need dlosses, and according to some, you need dlosses nulas balayla. And the Re'uyasli no doesn't help anything. And therefore, he's matir. He says he's matir for a different reason. He says because he comes up that if you look at the bridges entering and exiting Manhattan, they're not mefulsh one to another. So therefore, if they're not mefulsh, so we look at all the walls around Manhattan, and it's fine. But the Rebbe caught on to the first statement that he said that if not for the mechitzas of Manhattan, the whole Manhattan would have been Reshus Harabim midiraisa. The Rebbe wrote a short comment on it. It's on page 135 in the books. That's the letter to Rav Eisenstadt. Tzorich iyun ubirur. Page 135, the Rebbe writes, Tzorich iyun ubirur. To find out, the Kamedume seems to me, all the streets of Manhattan, Mistaimai Soif, they conclude Biksharim with the bridges, Umin Hades and tunnels, Hastumai Saidei Tzuras HaPesach, which are closed as Tzuras HaPesach, Oi Gam Mechitza, or there's actual walls over there, V'shranken. Shranken is those things which roadblocks, those things for the toll booths in the olden days. You'd have a stick would go up, so you'd be able to still see it some places. That you'd stop, you had to pay the toll, and the stick would go up. The arm would go up, and you could drive your car through. And the Rebbe says, "Look in Eish Lavram to the Buchacha." That's what the Rebbe writes. That's what the Rebbe writes over here. Now, so you look at the Rebbe's words. He says, the Rebbe didn't go when he discussed this. The Rebbe caught on to the idea that everything is a Reshus Harabim midiraisa. He says, how can you say everything is a Reshus Harabim midiraisa? Some streets end, all streets end with Tzuras HaPesach, or a Mechitza, or the Shranken. Yeah. or Tzuras HaPesach, or Mechitza, or Shranken. The fact is, the first thing that the Rebbe mentions is Tzuras HaPesach, which means that even if you want to say, that means that took it out of the Geder of Rishus HaRabim D'Oraisa. The Rebbe doesn't say it's because it's not Mefullish. We didn't go into that discussion. The Rebbe simply says, he says that he just hopped onto the thing that he wanted to say, that he said D'Oraisa, the Kuli Alma, Manhattan, we're Rishus HaRabim. Not so. You want to say the Kuli Alma, it's not, because even if you want to say it's Rishus HaRabim, the Kuli Alma, if not for the Mechitzas, no, it's not only Rishus HaRabim, because you have Tzuras HaPesach. No, it says Oy. Tzuras HaPesach, Oy Gam, Mechitzas V'Shanken, or Mechitzas. One or the other. So you can't say Rishus HaRabim Min HaTorah, the Kuli Alma, like he wanted to say. Seems so, because...
Kuli Alma.
Huh? Kuli Alma. Why? Who's the other one? The only one that writes like that clearly is Alter Rebbe. So obviously the Rebbe took that approach. The Alter Rebbe says it makes it ois a Rishus HaRabim. So maybe it's because of Mechitzas, maybe because of Shranken. Now, Mechitzas is an actual wall. Shranken is not a Mechitzas, it's not a Tzuras HaPesach. It's a stick which goes up. It's an arm which goes up. So could be it's a delos, which you're gonna might be able to consider the delos, which you're gonna discuss later when you get to the Tzemach Tzedek about losses. All right, but let's continue now with what the Alter Rebbe continues saying in the Siman, in the Sif. So the Alter Rebbe then says, therefore, because it's a Rishus that midirabbanon Tzuras HaPesach doesn't help to make a Rishus HaRabim into Rishus HaYachid. Therefore, when you have a Rishus HaRabim, the only way to do it is you have to have dlosses from each end, delos mikan umikan. And the dlosses, the Alter Rebbe for the next thing is the dlosses have to be locked at night, closed at night. Right? That's the Lashon of Alter Rebbe. Happens to be Rashi in the Gemara says B'chol Laila, every night. Alter Rebbe doesn't mention B'chol Laila anywhere in Hilchos Ceirovin. Every place, a few places it mentions losses, and all is B'Laila. It doesn't say every night. Maybe it doesn't have to be every night. I don't know. But the Alter Rebbe doesn't say B'chol Laila, every night it has to be locked. Why? The Alter Rebbe gives you a reason. The ilas with locking the doors makes this whole area, when you lock the two doors, when you have doors that lock, makes it Chatzer Achas Shel Rabim, converts it into one big Chatzer for everybody, and you make an Eruv in the whole, you make one Eruv for everything. Then the Alter Rebbe continues and says, as Yeshayim, that you don't really have to have it locked, mamish locked at night, it's enough if it's Re'uyos L'Noel, that it's only if it's fit to lock it, and that's why you have to make sure that they're in working condition, and you could actually close them if it's sunk into the earth. It doesn't count as losses at Re'uyos L'Noel because you can't close them. And Alter Rebbe says, V'yesh lahachmir k'zvare arishayna, yesh lahachmir, and you have to be machmir like the first svara that need losses hanin alois, and not only losses at Re'uyos L'Noel. And the footnote the Alter Rebbe says, Mashmos Shulchan Aruch v'Ramos Siman Shin Memhei. Afal pi, even though sheikr kisvara achrayna, even though the ikr is really like a second svara, you only need losses haruyis, yesh la'achmer, you have to be machmer like the shita harishayna. And Alter Rebbe continues, we already know, as already explained in Siman Shin Memhei, that the Yeshayim, that today we don't have a Rishus HaRabim Gemura, and obviously those that hold that you don't have a Rishus HaRabim Gemura, for them, you don't need losses haninolis. Right? It's enough for Tzuras HaPesach, you don't need losses bichlal. Since it's, if you hold that today is no Rishus HaRabim because there's no 600,000 people for whatever reason, there is no Rishus HaRabim today, so you don't need losses. All you need is a lechi from one end, a lechi or a kreida from one, and a Tzuras HaPesach from the other end, just like any other mavoi. But still, the Alter Rebbe and the Alter Rebbe that's according to the second shitta. The Alter Rebbe mentions today we don't hold it. But the Alter Rebbe gives you both shittas as Eikar Kisvara Achrayna, that you don't need the losses on all this, but Yesh Lachem Kisvara Harishayna. So you give me medayik over here, a simple thing. Eikar Kisvara Achrayna, we do paskin that 600,000 people is the din of Rishus HaRabim, but Yesh Lachem, you still have to be machmer like the Svara Harishayna, that you need the losses, which would obviously apply. That means that there is a Rishus HaRabim today, and you do have to make losses. And why is there a Rishus HaRabim today? Obviously, even though there's no 600,000 people, it's because of 16 amas wide. Just like over there, Alter Rebbe says you should be machmer. It doesn't say you have to be machmer in Shimon Hey, but over here it seems you have to be machmer like glosses on inalis. Now, the Alter Rebbe explains what's the reason that you have to have doors that lock. Because it converts the whole thing into one big chotzer. That's what it means. And what does it mean that you have closed doors makes everything into one chotzer, or the doors are open? How does it happen? What effect does a locked door have on everything? You could say when it's locked, it becomes one big chotzer, you make a eruv and it's good. If it's unlocked, what's the din? So let's go through and discuss something interesting explanation that Tzemach Tzedek has. Tzemach Tzedek in Perek Beis Ois Beis, page 87, explains the whole din of glosses. And he says, gives a different reason. He says, when the door, this is on page 87 in your book. He says, when the door, when hadelas nin eles, when the door is locked, choisemes hi es ha'ivrim. It blocks anybody from walking by. This is what he quotes the Rav Magid, the Magid Mishnah, who brings it the name of the Rashba. And therefore, delas in elas choisemes, one door blocking the traffic. It seems like it's enough with one door. According to the Ritva, the door reason is not because it blocks the people, it's because it's nidan kestima gemura or mechitza shleima. It's considered as a full wall. The Beis Yosef is the one who brings also the Rashba, and he expands on the Rashba. He doesn't just bring those 5 words that the Tzemach Tzedek, that the Magid Mishnah brings. He brings more than that. And the Beis Yosef quotes from the Rashba more that Reshus Harabim has to be Mosur L'Rabim B'chol Eis. And this that has one door that locks, at least on one side of it, blocks the traffic. It already loses the status of B'chol Eis, because to make Reshus Harabim you have to Mosur L'Rabim B'chol Eis at all moment. You put a door on one side, you lost the B'chol Eis. You no longer have B'chol Eis. If you no longer have the B'chol Eis, you no longer have the din of a Reshus Harabim. So it seems like for the Rashba, you don't need to have actually properly closed doors. You have to have doors which are fit to close. Obviously, no. However, you have a problem. What's the problem? That osurabim, back to the original, the big problem that we always have here. If it's obviously no, you have a problem with osurabim vatle mechitza, even if it's a mechitza gemura. So therefore, when you have an actual door which locks, and not only the obviously no, when you have an actual door that locks and it removes the bechol eis, so you already removed, you don't have the problem of osurabim and vatle. And the Tzemach Tzedek then says, it happens to be that Even HaOizer writes that when you have glosses that are uyesli noel, they don't have the status of a mechitza gemura, and because of osurabim, and therefore only 2 glosses are considered a mechitza, or are considered mechitza, no, sorry, he says glosses are uyes not considered mechitza gemura. And so seemingly it's a little bit similar to a Tzuras HaPesach. And the Tzemach Tzedek says it's not so. Even glosses are uyesli noel, even if it's not. He says it's still, glosses are uyesli noel is already considered a mechitza, at least according to some opinions. So one delas, if it's only one, if it's glosses are uyesli noel, it's not considered a mechitza. If it's one delas which gets locked, it's still not a mechitza gemura, because the wall is not completely surrounded. The only way it works is if you have 2 glosses from both ends. Then, if you have 2 glosses from both ends, it becomes a full and complete mechitza, and therefore you don't anymore have the osurabim vatle mechitzas. And Tzemach Tzedek concludes over there that glosses, even if they're not locked at night, are still much better than Tzuras HaPesach, which we mentioned. We actually mentioned that a few minutes ago. But the glosses, basically 2 ways of looking at glosses. Either that the Reshus Harabim has to be Mosur L'Rabim B'chol Eis, and therefore the glosses, even one delas, removes the Mosur L'Rabim B'chol Eis, which is a shita of the Rashba, or that it's a stima gemura mechitza shleima, which is a shita of the Ritva. And according to that, you would need 2 doors. Right? However, the Tzedek Alter Rebbe doesn't mention not this and not this. It doesn't mention that it's because that it doesn't bring that the losses are because it removes the muscle rabim b'choleis over here, and it doesn't mention that the muscle that it's because of mechitzah. The Alter Rebbe doesn't go into discussion what the definition of a delos is. When it comes to alechi, the Alter Rebbe defines you lechi mishum mechitzah. When it comes to koyre, the Alter Rebbe defines koyre is mishum heker. When the Alter Rebbe comes to pasin, the Alter Rebbe defines it. Over here, the Alter Rebbe doesn't tell you what glosses do. It says when you put glosses, it makes the whole thing into one big chatzar. So which way does Alter Rebbe go? Does he go into Rashi or does he go into Ritva? Does Alter Rebbe take the approach that we go that a delos is because that the Reshus Rabim has to have muscle Rabim b'chol eis at all time, and the delos removes the b'chol eis, and therefore it's no longer Reshus Rabim? Or the Alter Rebbe considers a delos glosses on olas like a mechitzah gemura, because the lashon doesn't give you a specific thing. It says asiyah kechatzer sherabim. So interesting, in Kuntas Acher in Siman Shin Memvov, Sifkot and Aleph, over there the discussion is about, I don't know if you remember, but about when you have the askupa, the step in front going into from a Carmelis into a field, and it has walls on the two sides and on top, but it's open. It's a doorway, but it's a wide doorway. It's a wide and long, deep doorway, and you go through it. And the question is this, do we say pitikra on both ends or on one end, or do we say that the wall at the other end of the chatzir suddenly moves up and blocks it, and we consider it all closed off over there? And over there, between the things that Alter Rebbe discusses, he brings this shit of the Rashba. He brings the Rashba and he says that Rashba, that he holds a delos which closes on one end. It's what's the definition? It's chosemes es ha'ivrim. Yeah, it blocks the people from going by. And what's the purpose of this delos? Is to limnoya levatel pilush ubekias rabim. The purpose of it is to prevent the rabim from going through it. Avol mikol mokim eino mechitza gemura lahatir. But it's not a mechitza gemura. Delos is not a mechitza gemura lahatir. Why? Hoil v'hi psucha, it's open sometimes. Oy niftachas kol hayom, it's open the whole day, but not at night. So over here, kol hayom, it's open the whole day. Still in all, it's not considered mamash a pirtze. Why? Because it's ninelas or oilina. But the delos is not a mechitza, it's not midin mechitza. According, he only brings the Rashba, but doesn't bring the Ritva. So it seems like the Alter Rebbe, this is the approach Alter Rebbe takes. It takes closer to the Rashba's shitta, that the din of glosses is mitzad, that it's chosemes es harabim. It blocks the rabim from going through. You need from both ends for a different reason, but not midin mechitza. Because midin mechitza, the Alter Rebbe tells you, ultimately when the door is open, you lose the mechitza over there. Well, it takes this. So therefore, what does it help? It helps like the shit of the Rashba. It helps like the shit of the Rashba. It blocks the people from going through. Yeah, so what does it do? It removes the definition of a pirtza. It's no longer a pirtza, and that makes no difference if it's locked or not. But how does it remove the pirtza and how does it remove the asirabim? Is by removing the masur rabim b'choleis. Because it's chosemes es ha'ivrim, it blocks them at a certain point in time, so it loses the status of it's mevatel the b'kias rabim. If it's mevatel the b'kias rabim, the mechitzas are still standing, but it's not mamash a mechitza. And it's not mamash a mechitza, you could use it as a mechitza. Obviously when it's closed, it's a mechitza, but when it's open, it's not considered a mechitza. For to be machshir reshus harabim, you don't need, it's mashma to be machshir, to make it reshus harabim, fine, you don't need mamash a mechitza gemura. All you need is something which will block the path of the people, to remove the masur harabim b'chol eis. And as long as you have the menias harabim, like the Lashon Alter Rebbe over there in Kuntas Acher is, that chosemes es ha'ivrim, the mevatel, that's mevatel the pilush b'kias rabim, and it's no longer considered a reshus rabim.
This construction is that blocking from God?
What?
So this construction on the road.
No, it's not. It's for the benefit of the people. Now, I just want to go, before I'm going to go to what we learn out of this, because there's some interesting things that come out of this, let's go back to something that we go back to what we discussed about the shlanken, right? We mentioned the shlanken. I didn't discuss exactly what the din of the shlanken. I wanted to first go into the glosses, the definition of glosses. The Rebbe says in Manhattan Tzorich to say that it's considered a Reshus Rabim Gemura because safe they end in toll booths with the stick, the toll things that block the people, the shlanken, or mechitzis, or tzurza Pesach. So what is the shlanken? The shlanken are mentioned already in previous doiros. It's a whole discussion. There's historical. I found it once and I lost it. I don't know where it is. It's a whole historical review of 600 years, 500 years in the Tshuvas that discuss the shlanken historically, what they were. Were they chain links? Was it like a one chain link pulling across? Was it a stick? Was it somebody picking up a stick? The point was that it's not a wall. What is it? It's just a bar that's blocking your traffic over there. So the Rebbe refers you to one Maramakim in over there. It says, look in Eshel Avram to the Buchacha and Siman Shemem. Over there, the Buchacha says that when the shlanken are down, it's considered like glosses on Olis Balayla. Why? Because it prevents the Rabbim. It's Mineya, the Pilush, it prevents the Rabbim from going through it. And it's definitely not Medin Mechitza. You cannot say it's Medin Mechitza. Why? Because if you ever saw shlanken, you'll see that any of them, it's more than 10 tefachim from the ground. You have mamish, definitely more than 3 tefachim, more than 10 tefachim. It's definitely not Medin Mechitza. It's Medin Delis. And how does it become Medin Delis? Because it's Menei the pilush of the Rabbim. And he writes, even though it's more than 10 tefachim from the ground up, and the L'cha'ira, more than 10 tefachim from the ground up, is not stam that it's not a mechitza. It's hiluch. Right? Because the minimum height that we all discuss is 10 tefachim. So you can actually go under it. It's not less than 3 tefachim, it's not a problem. If it's more than between 3 and 10, it's not. But if it's higher than 10, more than 10 tefachim, the L'cha'ira should not be considered anything. Why is it even a delis? It's opening. He says, no, it's not considered. Why? Because hiluch adayatchak lav shmei hiluch. That's what he says. So therefore, so now let's go back to it. If we go based on the shit of the Rashba, the way Tzemach Tzedek explains it, the way the Alter Rebbe explains it, that the idea of glosses is not medin mechitza. We don't have to look at the din of mechitza. Rather, it's a din in eliminating the pilush rabbim and eliminating the osir rabbim and eliminating the masur rabbim b'chol eis. So then you have the shlanken serve that purpose. It blocks the people. So yeah, I did see in certain places that say the shlanken today only block the cars. They don't block the people. But the shlanken that the Buchacha was talking about the other day he still considered losses. And I don't know if it was blocking people or it was blocking horses. I have no idea. The shlanken were not only made for people then. So still, the shlanken are considered losses. So if you look at losses and compare it mitzat pilush rabbim, l'chayra that should be fine. If you look at like the ritva that losses are medin mechitza gemura when they're closed, then you have a problem because these shlanken are not considered a mechitza gemura, and neither is in the first of all, doesn't mention it bichlal, but it's not considered the shit of the ritva. So now, what comes out of this? If we do follow this, we do take this approach. We take the approach of what Alter Rebbe brings in Kontesachin, the shit of the Rashba, that it's because it's mineya, the bekias, it removes the rabbim bechol eis from it, right? That's what we say. It's not medin mechitza when it's the losses and in all this. It's medin that it's mineya the rabbim bechol eis. It removes the bechol eis from it. It's mineya the pilush rabbim, and therefore it counts enough. It's not a mechitza, the Alter Rebbe says, but it counts enough to make it ois reshus rabbim. So we have a very big chumrah that comes out of this. The chumrah which I didn't see many people. I looked into it. I didn't find many mekayres about it. But what happens if you have if it's wider than 10 amas? All streets are wider than 10 amas today, right? So let's say it's the glosses make it that it becomes a chotzer shel rabbim. right? That's what it is. That's what the Alter Rebbe says. And the reason for it is because it's Moinea the Pilush, so it's no longer Rishus Harabim. The Dlasis. What happens now if you have a Pirza that's more than 10? When the Dlasis are closed, there's nothing to worry about. When the Dlasis are open, you have a Pirza, you're allowed to carry inside or not. During the day, are you allowed to carry in there or not? We don't say it's a mechitza. According to the Ritva, we say it's a mechitza and a stimma. Even when it's in all its balayla, it's still a mechitza and a stimma during the day. But according to the Rashba, that's not medin mechitza. The way the Alter Rebbe understands the Rashba, it's not medin mechitza. Then l'chayr, if you have a pirza which is more than 10 amas and you have losses over there, even then in all its balayla, you have to have a tzuras pesach over there also to cover it, to cover these gaps. The only way you could avoid it is by saying that you go that it's a mechitza. Gemura, but then you have a bigger chumrah on what to consider a delis. If you say that delis is only Nimnei Pilush Rabim, and you could rely on the way what the Rebbe sends you to in the Shranken, which fits with what the Alter Rebbe writes in Kuntres Achron, then you have to make sure to put Tzuras HaPesachs by the glosses during the time that they're open. There should be a big Tzuras HaPesach on top. So you put glosses to close off the Rishus Harabim in the openings wherever you have Rishus Harabim, you have to put glosses, but you have to make sure that there is a Tzuras HaPesach. The other nafkamina, go back to what I said before, that Alter Rebbe says Dosan in all his balayla doesn't tell you Kol Laila, right? That's the Lashon of Rashi. Also, but in Kuntres Achron, when the Alter Rebbe discusses over there, he says Kol Hayom, the whole day. It's open the whole day. That's where it's not. It doesn't say it's open long times. So if you're going to take the same kav of the Rashba that we mentioned before, that it's midin Minias B'Kiyas Harabim, and it's levatel the pilush of the Rabim. L'chayra should be enough to only do it a few times a year, because that already removes the pilush of the Rabim from this pathway. Especially if you have a Tzuras HaPesach and you put everything together, should be fine. But if you're going to say that it's medin mechitza, and you're going to follow the shit of the Ritva, it's medin mechitza. And what's the Shaila? The definition of mechitza, does it mean every night? Or does it mean not every night? If you look based, like I said, if you're going to go based on Rashi, Rashi says Kol Laila. Still, that's a question. I have a question. I don't have a conclusion on this specific.
If you do a Tzuras HaPesach and a delis, to the ritual would not be like a mechitza plus Minias Rabim.
It's not, because it's still Osir Rabim Mevatla. The issue is Osir Rabim Mevatla Mechitza. That's the problem over here. So if you have Osir Rabim, how are you going to solve the problem?
The delis, and then it's not the Nichot HaShemishtei, and then it's not the Tzuras HaPesach, and it's a mechitza.
But if you have only a Tzuras HaPesach, it doesn't still have Osir Rabim. And if you say if the doors are closed, you don't need it, because it's not. Question is, what's the din when the doors are open? That's the question. Happens to be, if you look at there's a bunch of tshuvas in the Avnei Nezer which are very interesting regarding this issue. He, which is, remember I explained to you before that according to the Rashba, the way he defines it, the Avnei Nezer in Eira Chaim Siman Reish Samach Zayin Ois Hey says that according to the Rashba, when the doors that get locked at night are not enough to consider it a mechitza during the daytime. That's pretty clear from the way the understanding of the Rashba. He says that's where it seems. According to the Rashba, it's not enough. It only helps to make it oiser shusarabim. It doesn't help to make it a mechitza. He says there are other opinions. He could say that it's also medin mechitza. But it's not what the Rashba holds. The Avnei Nezer does take the second approach. We do consider it a mechitza, and he connects the two together. He says we consider it a mechitza because it's meineya the B'Kiyas Rabim, and that's what's considered a stima malia. And therefore, even re'uyos li'noel are still considered a mechitza. He says why? Because re'uyos li'noel, it's already meineya regel rabim, and therefore it is considered a mechitza. Same thing as Siman Reisha and Gimel. He says that the re'uyim li'noel are like ne'ulim mamash, and even when they're open, they're considered a mechitza. And here comes the big chiddush that he says over there, that's for obviously no, that's considered a mechitza. But losses which are actually in the we see them keilu, according to the shit of the Ritva, which is how he takes it, the Avnezes Paskins. When the losses are in olas balayla, they're considered stumas gam bayoim, which fits into what I explained to you, what I explained to you before. And he brings in another thing, that the reason why, and he goes back, he says, why does Re'uyas Linal help? This is a very interesting thing he brings from the Ravan, which is also written something similar in the Ivan says that Kevon sheyesh lam sha'orim layoras re'uyim lin oil delas balayla Kevon de re'uyim lin oil areim k'na'ulim, being that they're fit to be closed, they're as if they're closed. The Avnei says it's similar to what Shas says called Roy Lebila and Bila Makevis. And that svara is also mentioned in the Chidushim of the Meiri. Now, but there's one more of Avnei that I want to mention because it goes to the glosses. In Siman Reish Pei, he says that Avnei says that you don't need Tzuras HaPesach when you have glosses already. And he says maybe the Alter Rebbe, you could be medayik the same thing from the Alter Rebbe, not here, but in Siman Shin Tzadik Beis. In Siman Shin Tzadik Beis, and the Alter Rebbe discusses it. He says if you have a city which was a Ir Shel Yochid, im ichshiru mevoiseho kehilchosam belechi oy koira oy tzuras HaPesach, oy glosses. Says you need either or. From that, the fact that it mentions each one independently, oy, 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 it obviously means that you don't need glosses and tzuras HaPesach. But again, like I mentioned to you from the Kuntesach and the Siman Shin Vav, it seems that you do need tzuras HaPesach to deal with the glosses when they are open. The only thing that's left to discuss, just a thing to think about, I'm not going to go into it now, is when you have these glosses, do we consider them for the cheshbon of Oimid Meruba ala Paretz or not? When they're open, when they're closed, think about it. I'm not going to make a decision because I don't have a decision on it, so I'm just telling you to think about it.